When we look at travel and logistics, we look at it like everything in Formula One. What are the key variables that we need to improve to ensure that we are being more efficient, faster, and improve our performance from a sustainability perspective? And what that looks like in practice is the amount that travels, the distance that travels, as well as the mode that it travels by. And for each and every piece of kit, we look at those three variables and determine the best outcome for them.
Mm. Sustainable fuels, you've been using those, also biofuels, sustainable aviation fuels, e-fuels. I mean, they're still quite niche, not that widely available. Environmentalists are concerned that they can still have quite a large overall carbon footprint. How do you think that Formula One is helping in that sense? Which fuels are most important that you're developing and how you're using them now to cut emissions?
So it links to the first question about how do we move in a more efficient manner. And as you said, the first step is you reduce the amount that needs to travel through actions like remote broadcast, where we have over 140 individuals based in the UK, whether we're racing in Belgium this weekend or further afield the next. But then equally, once you've reduced the amount that needs to travel, the distance that it needs to travel through things like our calendar changes, that's when you need to tackle the mode and say, what are the technical innovations available today that can support us in those reductions? And a big part of that is alternative fuels. And when you look at alternative fuels, you see them in practice at Formula One in our biofuel truck fleet, which is helps move our Formula One kit around our European races. And that is fueled by a biofuel called HVO 100. And what that means is that it is a second generation biofuel that's not from food crops and that is available so that we can refuel our trucks and lower our carbon emissions by as much as 83% in that segment. And we go further than that. We also say, how do we look at aviation and solutions there? The first step that we did was change our shipping containers so that they could go on more efficient planes. Again, reducing the amount of fuel that you need because you are more efficient in that technology of aircraft. And then once you have what needs to fly, you say, well, how do we power this? And for us, we have been looking at and delivering across sustainable aviation fuel. It came live in our operations in 2024 for the first time. When you look at sustainable aviation fuel, it goes through that same process of how do you verify the feedstocks to ensure that they're not from food crops? How do you verify the life cycle analysis to ensure that they are reducing carbon emissions by a minimum 80%? And then how do you take it through that audit process to link it down to the kilogram of kit onto a plane?
These are a lot of changes. How much does it cost Formula One to do all this?
So when you look at sustainability, there's two parts about what we're doing. The first is building it into the definition of performance and building it into the solutions from the start. And that's really critical because what it means is you make those reductions first in terms of changing how you operate before you then invest in what new technologies can look like. And so that helps the equation when you balance it out. The other side of what we're doing is actually research and development. And when you look at research and development, particularly in the Formula One cars, that is a major investment and why we see the original engine manufacturers, the teams putting in so much time into whether it's hybrid engines or advanced sustainable fuel. And that research and development process has major investment, but it also has a major implication for future road relevant technologies that can not only help us get around the track, but hopefully to the school run.
Yes, yeah, eventually. In terms of the individual teams, they have a lot of autonomy, though, don't they? They kind of run as separate businesses. How committed are the individual teams to the decarbonisation drive? I mean, they have control over their own teams, their vehicles, their transport, logistics personnel, so on.
So understanding the world of sport and all the relationships is probably one of the most difficult things is saying, how do we work together? How do we understand whether it's contractual, whether it's because we've made an agreement? And that's actually what our net zero by 2030 commitment is. It brought in different entities and organizations that wouldn't typically be under the same carbon footprint to say, we have a shared goal, which is to have our emissions by 2030. And we have shared areas that we are delivering in, such as powering our factories and facilities by renewable energy, which we have a great number to announce today, which is that we've reduced that area significantly since 2018 because all 10 teams are part of that renewable energy transition in their factories and facilities, in addition to Formula One. We also then are able to create shared solutions. So the investment in sustainable aviation fuel, rather than each and every team creating their own framework, we have a centralized framework that they can then be part of, and we have increasing uptake in that space. And the list goes on. Energy at our track. In our European season races, we have a shared energy solution where the teams no longer have to bring their generators on track. So that reduces logistics, but it also creates a centralized solution that can be powered by green grid, biofuels like HVO, on-site renewables, and run more efficiently to save energy. So the teams are part of it. You know, we all have our own counterparts who we work with to ensure that we can move faster as a group, but they also are making their own individual steps. And then a step further is how the regulations support that. So in 2026, we have a new set of regulations coming out. And what that is the hybrid engines powered by advanced sustainable fuels. And what that brings to us is the element of competition, which is so critical because we're trying to create the best solutions, the best advanced sustainable fuel from a performance perspective, which has road relevance in future.
But these are, as you point out, major investments that are being made by Formula One. I'm just trying to get an idea of what the scale of that investment is. Obviously, not many businesses have the amount of cash at their disposal as Formula One might have to be able to put money into this. So can you give us an idea of how much Formula One has invested in this project?
So from an investment perspective, you might need to speak to my finance director on those numbers. I can talk to you about the delivery and what we're doing and the why. And so when you talk about sustainability and the why, you do need everyone in the chain to be part of it. You need the research and development, the first movers, the first individuals to deliver so that you can start to scale solutions. And we see that in Formula One as a brilliant place for research and development that is well funded and a critical part of sustainability. But you also see it as we move those technologies from on track to off track and how we scale them. And that can go into whether it is our trucks in Europe, which are fueled by biofuel, that can go into how we host more sustainable events and work with our race promoters, changing the standard for one Formula One event that then impacts all of the races, or excuse me, all of the events that are hosted by that event promoter for the year.
Part of the 2018 goal was to cut emissions by a minimum of 50%, but then to actually achieve the net zero goal, the rest of it would be done by offsetting, so investing in other things, in things like rainforests. I mean, is that still the goal? And what about the projects that you're investing in order to deliver on that offsetting goal?
So first and foremost, climate science says that we must take action in this decade, which we're halfway through, to reduce our carbon emissions. And you do that through changing your operations, investing in new technologies, having a culture change and training your people to develop sustainability solutions from the onset of their projects. And that is where we are focused on right now. It is how do we make reductions by materially changing our operations. Once we have created and made those reductions, you get to the net part of net zero by 2030. Because what does net mean? It means what remains after reductions. And from a Formula One perspective, we will approach that portion of what net zero means with the same efficiency and diligence to say, what does best practice look like? What is the role that we uniquely have to play, being Formula One and being a leader in technologies? And so at the moment, it's 100% focus on reductions, which is what you see in the number today, but we will shift as we get closer to that goal to understand what does best practice in carbon offsets, removals, and however it may be badged in 2030.